Jane and Michael live in the suburbs of a small town in Wisconsin, both in their early 60s. Their pension is not golden, but it is enough for bread and butter and a TV. Their home is a 2-story shingle-roofed house, almost entirely covered in grapes, where it smells of apples, hot coffee, and fresh newspapers. They have been together for 32 years. The children are adults, already living in California. There are no grandchildren yet, but the photos on the fridge are enough to remind them every morning that life was good. Jane was the first to wake up every morning, in her fluffy slippers, wearing her apron with the words, Queen of Omelets. She fried eggs, and Michael, like clockwork, would go out on the porch, light up his only cigarette of the day, and grunt. Such beauty, it's a sin not to live longer. Their life was simple. No fancy resorts, no fancy restaurants. There were crossword puzzles on the kitchen table, old movies on TV, and silence that did not press, but healed. Everything looked like a picture. She ironed his shirts. He carried heavy packages from the store, and they watered roses together, quarreled over politics, and made up over a glass of cheap wine. Michael always called Jane, my Jew. She would blush even though she knew it was a habit. But it was a warming habit. When they went to the pharmacy together, or just walked to the river, it seemed like the whole world froze. They talked about everything that had happened, but rarely about what would happen. And here is the first crack, an AAA small one, barely noticeable. Jane began to notice that Michael became more silent. His evening walks without her became more frequent. He began to spend more time on his phone, even though he always said he didn't care about technology. She didn't suspect anything serious. She just thought maybe age, maybe a crisis. But something in his eyes began to fade, like a light bulb before it burns out. Sometimes Jane remembered how they used to run away to the beach when they were young. How Michael would run her barefoot through the sand and then fall into the water, laughing like there was no tomorrow. Adabon as she saw her entire life with him as a series of black and white photographs, clear, real, precious. Their home was like a memory too. Every corner had its own story. The kitchen walls were covered with traces of tomato sauce because Michael had once decided to throw a spoon, Italian style, in the bedroom has a barely squeaky bed, which, as they joked, he has been through so much that it has the right to creak. Financially, life was not luxurious, but it was stable. An OAA pension from the state, some savings, and social assistance. Jane sometimes earned money online, writing product reviews. Michael took small part-time jobs because he couldn't sit around. They dreamed of going to Texas again. Amana to just drive a car without a navigator. Getting lost together is what freedom means, he said. But this spring, something changed. Jane felt it. Everything around her seemed to be the same as always, but her heart could no longer keep up with her mind. Michael came home late, his eyes shining with a strange intensity. She noticed that the ring was missing from his finger. He said he forgot it in the bathroom. She nodded. But from that moment on, she began to look more closely. So far, they are just shadows, barely noticeable wrinkles on the face of happiness. But Jane could no longer completely trust the calm. Her intuition, sharpened by years of living with her husband, said, "Look closely. The storm is coming." It started small. The Michael started coming back later. At first, for a few minutes, then for an hour, and then Jane would go to bed alone. In the morning, he would still drink coffee and tell her that he was late at the site, that there had been an accident, or that stupid Bob forgot his keys again. But Jane knew Michael well. His voice had changed. He sounded like he was trying to recreate something he no longer felt. Michael had always been neat. Jane used to joke that he was the kind of man who ironed even his underwear. But for a week now, she's been noticing that his shirts smell like a perfume that isn't hers. Not the one she'd bought at Walmart with a coupon, but something expensive, with a slight Swedish trail, as if from an advertisement. He didn't wear perfume. Never. He said his skin itched. One evening, Jane walked by the living room and noticed Michael quickly tap something on his phone when he saw her. He used to leave it in the kitchen, in the bedroom, in the bathroom. Now he carried it with him even when he went to take out the trash. The phone was no longer just a device. It became a secret. One night, Jane woke up to a strange sound, laughter. Michael was on the phone in the bathroom. He was laughing like he hadn't laughed with her in a long time. It was a light, flirtatious laugh, as if he were young again. He came back into the bedroom with a phrase, "That was Bob." His cat tried to eat the pizza. She nodded. But from then on, a voice settled in her head. It wasn't a pizza, and it wasn't a cat. Michael used to love his Saturday breakfasts at home. He used to fry the bacon himself, saying, "Life is bacon and you." But now, on Saturday mornings, he was gone. He said, "Have to go, I have to work. Work on Saturday." Michael. He would come home in the afternoon smelling like someone else's perfume, and his shoes would be freshly polished. And most importantly, he had someone else's shine on his face. Not the one after morning coffee, but the one that appears after someone else's eyes. Jane was not jealous. But this change in him, it was sharpening her from the inside, as if someone was rearranging the furniture in her head. And one day she opened his closet and noticed that the jacket he wore only on holidays was gone, and the purple tie she had bought him for his anniversary. This was not in any of the stories about the work. One evening she picked up his phone. She just picked it up. He was not at home. The password didn't work. There had been no passwords before. Jane felt the blood in her throat. That screen was like a locked door. And she already knew there was something behind it. And worse, she wanted to know. Over dinner, Michael began to talk a lot and about nothing. About gasoline, about the new refrigerator in the store, about how Bob is being a clown again. But he didn't ask how Jane was doing. He didn't listen when she answered. He was sitting next to her, but he was far away, as if he was already on the other side of the border, which she hadn't crossed yet. Jane started looking for signs. She studied his clothes, listened to his tone of voice, checked his pockets, looked at him sweetly at dinner as if nothing had happened. But inside her, a plan was already being born. Not revenge yet, but not blind love. The world around her remained the same, tea with lemon, the TV on Channel 2, Murphy the cat on the windowsill. But Jane's heart already knew that something was coming, and this something was not just a quarrel. It would be a storm that would blow the roof off her familiar world. She didn't know when it would happen, but from now on, she was no longer someone who took her word for it. She is the one who sees between the lines, and it was Sunday morning, and Michael was back at work. Jane sat by the window with a cup of coffee. Snow was falling softly outside. Murphy, the cat, was scratching his paw sluggishly at the window pane, and the storm was raging inside. No more doubts, no more suspicions. Something else, stronger, closer to the truth. She could no longer live in this state of half-truth. It hurt her not to know, but it was worse to know. Jane dialed the number of a private investigator who had once been recommended to her by a book club colleague. "He's worked with lawyers. He'll even find a needle in a haystack," she said. The voice on the phone was calm and professional. "A man named Steed. I'll need a few days. I'll find out everything. You just hang in there." And Jane waited. For 2 days she slept very little and ate even less. All her movements were automatic. All her thoughts were about Michael. On Wednesday at 11 in the morning, Steve called. His voice was a little softer. "I'll send you everything by email. But if you can, I'd like to meet you. It's better to see it in person." Jane agreed. An hour later, they were sitting in the coffee shop where she used to have lats with Michael after Sunday church. Steve opened the folder. The photo was of her and Michael, and a young woman, tall with brown hair, wearing tight jeans and red lipstick. They were standing outside a shopping center. He was holding her by the waist, kissing her neck. He was laughing. He looked happy. Her name is Lisa," Steve said, 38 years old. She works in the office of the same company as Michael. And yes, it's been going on for 3 months now. Jane looked at the pictures. Her hands were shaking, and but her eyes went cold. Her world shattered like porcelain under her heel. She did not cry. Not yet. She drove home slowly. Her hands did not hold the steering wheel. It was a habit. Her head was throbbing. She turned on the radio. An old Elvis song was playing, their song. Jane hit the button to turn it off, and for the first time that day, she cried. These were not just tears of pain. They were tears of loss, of ohimon about how years of trust, of mornings and dinners together suddenly mean nothing, about how one choice can erase everything. She remembered how Michael was sick last year, and she sat by his side at night, taking his temperature, carrying broth, kissing his forehead. Oh, she remembered how for Christmas he gave her a pendant with the words "Forever yours." Forever, you say. Everything was mixed in her head, holiday memories and the bitterness of the present. Everything that had once been bright had suddenly become poisonous. That night, Jane sat in the dark. The cat was sleeping at her feet, and her mind was full of images, Michael and Lisa, kissing, her lipstick on his neck. She wanted to call him, to scream, to ask why, but she didn't. Instead, she opened her laptop, and for the first time in her life, she typed a phrase into Googling. How to get back at your husband for cheating. She realized that she no longer wanted to be just a victim. Her pain had turned into something sharp, into a tool. She didn't know what she was going to do yet, but she already knew that silence was not an option. And for the first time in a long time, she felt not fear, but strength. She was humiliated, but she was not yet broken. The morning came as cold as the new Jane. And as she stood in front of the mirror, washing away the tears that had remained from the night, she looked at herself not as a woman who had been betrayed, but as a woman who now knows the truth. The truth is painful, but it opens a new chapter. A week passed after Jane learned the truth. Michael acted as if nothing had happened. He came home late, left his dinner plate untouched, and turned the TV up louder than necessary. She didn't say anything, or not because she forgave me, but because I listened. I watched. On Monday, she found an envelope on the kitchen table. A simple white folder labeled "Documents" in his handwriting. She opened it, and there was something that made her drop her coffee cup right on the floor. A deed of gift, an official one, for the house, signed by Michael and transferred in Lisa's name, without her consent, without a conversation. No explanation. Here on a Thier house. Her home. The house where she lived for over 30 years, planting flowers, feeding the cat, painting the shutters. Now it was no longer hers. She could not believe her eyes. She read it again and again, page after page. Then it was official. The lawyer, the stamp, the date. It turned out that Michael had formalized everything 2 weeks ago. That is, even before she found out about the affair. Everything had been planned in advance. That evening, she was waiting for him like a judge waits for a defendant. She was sitting in the kitchen, in the dark, with only the lamp above the table on. He came in, threw his keys on the dresser, as usual. Did you give the house to her?" she asked without a single emotion. He froze. Then he shrugged his shoulders. "Lisa and I are starting a new life. And I thought it was for the best." "You thought?" Her voice was quiet but sharp. "Did you think about where I'd be? You have a pension. You have children," he muttered. "And anyway, it's all a formality." "Formality!" Her voice cut off the air. He was silent. And then he said the worst thing, "Jane, there hasn't been anything between us for a long time. And this house, it's just a house." She left the room without slamming the door. She just went to the bedroom, took her suitcase, put the most necessary things. She left everything else behind. Let them now live among her memories, her curtains, her towels. That night she left. She didn't go anywhere. She just went. The next morning, she was sitting in her car in the parking lot of a supermarket. Keith Murphy was sleeping in the back seat. She had a few things in her bag, some documents, some money. For the first time in years, no one needed her. No one called. No one asked where she was or if she was alive. Her house belonged to a stranger now, and so did her husband, and all she had was an empty tank and a desire to disappear. She dialed her daughter, not immediately after a few breaths of air. Her daughter was always busy, distant, like another planet. "Mom, I can't stay long. Brad and I are on the road." "I left home. He kicked me out. He gave the house to another woman." Are a few seconds of silence. "Are you kidding? Mom will talk about this later, okay?" Click. Silence. The line is disconnected. And then Jane realized she had no one to lean on. No children, no friends. Everyone is doing their own thing in their own lives. And she is like an old book that someone put on a shelf and forgot. But it was in this loneliness that she first realized she had nothing left to lose. She went to the old gas station outside the city where she used to work in her youth. Everything was different there, but the smells were the same: gasoline coffee, cinnamon rolls. She sat down on a bench and closed her eyes. Words were running through her head. This is just home. He never understood. For her, it wasn't home, it was herself. As the sun set over the horizon, Jane opened her laptop. She created a new folder. She named it, Reclaiming Myself. She had been kicked out. She had been betrayed. But she is not finished yet. She still has a voice, and it will be heard soon. In a cheap motel on the outskirts of town, Jane lay on a bed covered in an old blanket that smelled like cigarettes. Murphy was nestled against her side. She was awake. Her mind was working at full capacity, in anger, pain, humiliation all mixed together. But in the midst of it all, something new had emerged. A cold, hard thing like a blade. A decision. She would not wait any longer. Now she would act. He left her homeless. Good. But he'd have something to remember. Jane didn't want to just strike at random. She needed a plan. A carefully thought out one. And she also needed it to be sophisticated. Scorched earth, she whispered. If he had ruined her life, he would get his in return. She opened her laptop. It was old and slow, but it still worked. For the first time in a long time, Jane felt her fingers move with confidence. She logged on to Facebook. She found Lisa. Her profile was public classic self-confidence, photos from restaurants, selfies in the gym, and a caption, "Love wins." Below the photo was Michael's comment, "My queen." Jane almost smashed the screen, but she restrained herself. Instead, she downloaded all the photos. She saved the posts. She went through the likes and friends. She studied everything: her lifestyle, work, habits, favorite places. Jane discovered that Lisa worked at a small bank. She works in the lending department. She had a lot of photos with her bosses, posts about success, transparency, and ethics. She also has a lot of pictures with clients. That is, she has a reputation. And what's most interesting is that the firm has a strict dress code for employee behavior outside the office. Jane created a new account, and she called herself Margaret Spencer, and put up an avatar from the internet, a pretty woman of an age, as if she were a local client. She wrote a few innocent comments on the bank's page, and then a personal message to the branch director. "Sorry to bother you, but I would like to draw your attention to the behavior of your employee Lisa." Her personal photos published with client information raise questions. Act sincerely, a concerned pensioner. 2 days later, Lisa published a post with a touch of panic. "I don't understand where these rumors are coming from. I have never crossed the line in my work. I hope the management realizes this." Jane smiled. This was only the beginning. Next up was Michael himself. He couldn't be left out either. She created another account, this time as a young woman named Alicia. Her profile included provocative photos, some eroticism, and a bit of philosophy. She wrote to him, "Hello, handsome. I have been looking at your photos for a long time. You are such a real man. Can we get to know each other a little better?" Michael replied 20 minutes later. "Sure. Just everything is hidden. Saved." Jane knew that such things could easily turn into public shame, especially when he was still working with people. She created an email account and started sending out screenshots from it. Anonymously. to the local newspaper, to social media groups, to neighborhood forums. Not all the captioning. Not all couples in our neighborhood are what they seem. See the proof below. The comments began to multiply. People started looking for who it was about. There were no names yet, but there were more than enough hints, and Jane felt a surge of energy. For the first time in a long time, she was in control of the situation. Her actions had an effect. She was no longer crying. She was acting, and it was sweet. Dangerous, but sweet. As evening fell on the city, Jane sat on the motel windowsill. Murphy purred next to her, his laptop blinking softly. She knew the war had begun, and though she was homeless, she was no longer powerless. There were more blows ahead. And she was ready to deliver each and every one of them. Jane woke up before the sun. The motel was cold, but her heart was on fire. Not fear, not sadness, but real excitement. Her first steps had worked. After so many days of powerlessness, she felt alive for the first time. She went to the mirror and looked into her eyes. There was no weakness there. There was focus. "The game is on," she whispered. Lisa wrote a post. Angry without specifics, but with despair between the lines. "I know that some people are trying to ruin my reputation, but the truth will prevail anyway." Jane read it with coffee in hand. Then she opened a new profile and left a comment. "Maybe the truth is just not what you want it to be, Lisa." Other commenters picked up on the topic. Someone asked if she really worked with client data. Someone threw in, "Who among us is without sin?" That same day, a discussion began in the bank's corporate chat room. One of the employees Jane had found through LinkedIn posted a question on the internal system. "Do we have a policy on employees, private relationships, that could affect the bank's image?" Jane knew it wasn't an accusation, it was a hook. More would follow. Using a different account, Jane called the bank's hotline. As a customer, I'm concerned that your employee is constantly posting photos with people she captions as my favorite customers. Isn't this confidential?" The operator tried to be polite. Jane could hear the tension in his voice. She knew that such complaints are recorded, and then they are passed on to the management. As Lisa spun around trying to put out the fire, Jane turned to Michael. Her Alicia had been corresponding with him for several days, and his responses were becoming more and more explicit. He sent her funny photos, jokes, even a video of himself standing shirtless in front of their former home. Jane kept everything, and she was preparing the next step. She arranged for a delivery. A simple yellow envelope. It contained a flash drive. On the flash drive were screenshots of correspondence, some photos, and a recording. "Look who your faithful is playing double games with, Lisa." And think about who else he wrote to. Signed, Other. She ordered a delivery to the department where Lisa works, not to her home, so that she could open it at the workplace, in front of her colleagues. A day later, Lisa's page became private. All posts were deleted. Her photos were deleted as well. Her profile disappeared from the corporate website. In the evening, Michael called Jane. "Did you do it?" His voice was rough and firm. She was silent for a few seconds. And then she said, "Did think you could destroy my life and then go on living as if nothing had happened. It's all a lie, Jane. I didn't mean for it to happen this way. But it did. And you made it happen. Now you're going to have to take it." He hung up. It was only the first wave. She knew that if she stopped, it would come back. They would find a way to get out of it again, to twist the truth. So she decided to keep going. Now deeper, now more painful, she registered at a community forum. They discussed neighborhood news, rumors, and new faces. She wrote a story. One woman lost her house because her husband gave everything to his young mistress. She didn't mention any names, but she mentioned the city, and some facts. Comments began to fall like autumn leaves. I know who you're talking about. Isn't that the one from the house on Oakville?" Yes, he came with a young woman so glamorous. The story went viral, and Jane just watched. In the evening, she sat on a bench near the old park. She was holding a new notebook. In it, a list of next steps. She was no longer sad. She was playing a game. And this game was her way of regaining respect. And herself. Lisa sat in her office, staring at the screen. Her new hairstyle, her new life. Perfect. Man, everything suddenly seemed fake. Yesterday, she was summoned by the bank's management. They asked her about ethical standards, behavior outside of work, clients and photos on social media. It was easy, nothing specific, just a conversation for prevention. But the face of the colleague opposite said more than words. There was condemnation, and a curious light, as if she had become the subject of backstage gossip. At home, she started browsing social media, and she came across comments. The indirect but very accurate, someone knew, someone saw. But who? She felt something cold crawl under her ribs. For the first time in all that time, she realized that someone was watching. Michael, she began at dinner. Have you ever noticed anything strange lately? He shrugged. No, why? I think someone is. Watching, writing to me. And it doesn't seem like a coincidence. It's Jane, he said immediately. Your ex. Our ex. Yeah, it's definitely her. She's changed. She hasn't forgiven me. Lisa took the glass of wine. She looked out the window. There was darkness, and in it was the reflection of a woman who was afraid. That night, she received a message from an unknown account. This is not over yet. You didn't just take her husband. You took someone else's life, and it will come back to you. The signature read, Return. Lisa threw the phone on the bed. Her head was pounding. She wasn't afraid, she was disgusted. Someone had entered her space, into her new life. The next day, she wrote a complaint to the social network's administration. She blocked her profile. She changed her privacy settings. She deleted hundreds of photos. But the feeling remained, as if someone was looking over her shoulder, all the time. Lisa decided to do things her way. She found Jane's old number, and she called. Not from her cell phone, but from her work phone, anonymously. Hello? Hi. Did you set this up? A few seconds of silence. Then a calm voicing, what is it? Oh, you know, a message, rumors, gossip. All this is you. I'm just a woman without a home. And you are a woman with a stranger's. Click. The line went dead. The call knocked Lisa out of her rut. She tried to remain calm, but a storm was raging inside her. If Jane is on the phone, she's still around. If she was, it could turn into something worse. She started reading forums. In one post, she came across something painfully familiar, a description of the situation, almost word for word. The comments were harsh, and some of them had addresses. We have to talk, she told Michael the next day. They met in the park. She looked him cautiously in the eye. Tell me honestly, what else are you hiding? I'm not hiding anything. You've been texting with someone called Alicia. She's a fake, right? Michael turned pale. I thought it was just flirting. She leaked your photos to my work. Do you realize what that means? He was silent. We can't do this anymore, Lisa said. You're not ready, and you're not worthy. Lisa, wait. And I've already waited. And I lost everything, and now you're losing it. She got up and left. She didn't look back. That evening, Jane sat in silence. The letter read by itself, Lisa is gone. Michael is alone. He doesn't know what will happen next. She smiled, but not with joy. She smiled with peace. She did not destroy them. They fell apart on their own. She just pushed the first domino. That morning was unusually calm. Jane woke up before dawn. The modal smelled like coffee from a vending machine and old carpet, but she didn't care about the little things. Today was day X. She had several tabs open on her laptop. All of them contained material she had been collecting for months, photos, videos, correspondence, call records. She looked through everything again and clicked upload. She created a blog, a simple page, no names. The tightleg, the story of a betrayal. Everything was laid out in a sequencing, how a man left his wife after 30 years of marriage, gave the house to his mistress, and played the happy life himself. Facts, dates, screenshots, excerpts from documents, anonymous testimonies from well-wishers. From the bank, all of this was collected, organized, and published in one click. Caption, believe not in words, but in deeds. Or at least look into the eyes of those who have been betrayed. The post went viral in local groups. Jane had made arrangements in advance with several bloggers who specialized in whistleblowing. One of them wrote, "When a man cheats, it's trivial. But when he cheats and takes the house and then plays the victim, that's a story the world needs to know about." Comments poured in like a downpour. A real snake. Did he think he could get away with it? I fully support the author. Michael saw the post a few hours later. He received a call from a former colleague from a construction company. "Have you heard what they say about you on the internet? They say you're a real crook." He opened the page and froze. Everything he was trying to hide was in front of the eyes of hundreds, thousands of people. He whispered, but there was no anger in his voice, only understanding and fear. He couldn't take it anymore. He called. "Jane, Emma, please. Stop. We can talk. We can work this out." She was silent for a few seconds. "I tried to talk. You thought you could erase me from your life like an old page. Now read it to the end." He sighed. "I made a mistake." "No, Michael. No, Essa, you made a choice. Now live with it." Jane went to a lawyer. She knew it would be difficult to get the house back. But her new ally found a legal loophole. Michael had made a deed of gift without the consent of the spouses, which is subject to revision under certain conditions. They filed a lawsuit. The news of the lawsuit appeared in the local press. Michael's name was officially mentioned in the article. The man who left his wife and lost everything. On the same day, Lisa posted a video. She sat with red eyes, no makeup on, and said, "I thought I was taking away love. But in reality, I took away pain. I am not a victim, and I am not an angel. But to be honest, I was deceived too." The comments were mixed. Someone sympathized, someone scolded. But the main thing is that she disappeared. She deleted her accounts. She moved out of town. Without saying goodbye. He was fired from the contracting company. Unethical behavior and reputational damage were the official wording. He became toxic in the town. No one wanted to deal with. The guy everyone reads on the blog. He stayed in an empty house. With his memories and the silence that no one else's presence fills. She rented a small cottage in a neighboring town. She started working online, writing stories. And do you know what? Her stories were read. They touched the souls of many people. She found her voice. She got herself back. In the evening, she drank tea by the fireplace. Murphy purred at her feet. On the table was a printout of the latest blog post. The headline, "Not all battles are won by force. Some are won with endurance." She smiled, and finally closed her eyes, not with anxiety, but with relief. A few weeks passed. The city calmed down. Facebook posts gradually disappeared, and public interest waned. People switched to other scandals. Someone sold a house illegally. Someone fled to Mexico with a lover. But something was still smoldering in the hearts of the three people. Not passion. Not love. It was residue. Another kind of residue that remains after a big fire. She woke up every morning in a new house. Small, simple but hers. When she hung out the laundry, she no longer thought about Michael. When she made tea, she didn't think about Lisa. But the truth was that they were a part of her. And they would remain not in words but in the shadows of her thoughts, in the pauses between her breaths. One evening her phone rang. An unknown number. She didn't want to answer it. But she did. Jane, it was him. Michael. I won't be long. I just wanted to tell you was blind. And cruel. And probably stupid. I agree, she said quietly. If you can ever forgive me, I have for you, but I forgave myself. For not saying anything for so long, and she hung up the phone. Suddenly she received a letter. An old-fashioned paper letter. The handwriting was small and neat. Jane. Emma, if you're reading this, it means I've made up my mind. I'm not looking for forgiveness. I just want you to know that Michael lied to me in the same way. I'm not making excuses for myself, though, but I believe that you are stronger than both of us. and if you can laugh about it someday, do. You have the right to do so. Bah? She read the letter 3 times. She didn't know whether to cry or laugh. Other than a but, something inside her felt lighter. It was true. Everything that had been hidden was now on the surface. Documents, betrayals, intentions, weakness, resentment, even little lies. But what of it? Did it get easier? Did it get any better? There was no answer. She was no longer recognized on the streets. In the supermarket, the cashier simply asking, paper bag or plastic. And that was the most pleasant thing, to be a nobody. Not a woman who was betrayed. Not the heroine of an online blog, just Jane. She started writing, not about herself. About others. About a woman who sold her house and moved to the desert. About a pensioner who ran away from his gardener. About a teenager who opened a used bookstore. Her texts were read. She was written to. She was respected. But most importantly, she finally respected herself again. Sometimes at night, she would listen to the wind blowing through the window. And she thought, what if everything had been different? What if Michael hadn't cheated? What if she hadn't found out, and she would return to silence again? Because it is in it that the answer lies. She wrote a letter to her children, not as a complaint. It was a confession. My dear ones, and if you ever feel like giving up, running away, giving up, remember that your mother, at 63, started all over again. Do not be afraid. Never, even when you are alone. She did not send it. She just kept it. Maybe someday. The lamp was on the table. Murphy was dozing, curled up. Jane was finishing the last paragraph of a new story. There was a woman who lost everything and found herself. She pressed, save. And then she turned off the light and smiled. Or subscribe to the channel if this story touched you.